Hello everyone, this will be the 14th chapter of The Second Life of the Guardian, written and read by Insect Overlord. This chapter is titled, My Therapist Married Who? An essay by Midoriya Izuku. Izuku clutched his recently won fish bag and whipped his head about, searching for his parents. He was at a spring festival with them, the first one he had ever been to. His parents had gotten him all dressed up for the celebration, then cooed at how adorable he was. He wore a dark blue yukata with a green dragonfly sign. He had wanted whales, but they couldn't find any. They had gotten food together and then played a few games, and before Izuku knew it, he turned around and couldn't see his parents anymore. Izuku backed up until he was between two stalls, then crouched down to hide. He didn't want to ask anyone to help him find his mom and dad. He was too scared of getting kidnapped. He had never had this fear as Marinette, but then he was taller and stronger, and he had Tiki to help him if things went south. Now he was just little, powerless Izuku. Izuku picked his head up from where it sat between his knees when he smelled tobacco smoke. There, standing at the edge of the stalls, was a man smoking a cigarette. He was tall, had long, messy black hair, and looked like he might be homeless if it weren't for the clearly well-made, cat-patterned yukata he wore. He looked like exactly the person a kid Izuku's age would be afraid of, but he didn't give off the same aura that the quirk doctor did. If anything, his aura was kind, like how a hero's should be. Izuku sniffed, and the man nearly dropped his cigarette with how quickly he turned his head. When he noticed Izuku, nearly encased in the stall's shadow, he sighed. He let his cigarette fall and snuffed it out with his foot, before crouching where he stood, still a few feet from Izuku. "Hey, kid, you lost?" he asked. His voice was rough, probably from the smoking. "Yeah," Izuku responded quietly, then sniffed again, rubbing his nose with his sleeve. The man made a disgusted face at that, which caused Izuku to giggle. "My name's Aizawa. What's your name, kid?" The man, Aizawa, offered. Izuku frowned. "Why? Mom might get upset if I told a stranger my name," Izuku responded. His mom wouldn't take "the man seemed nice" as a good enough reason for trusting him. Izuku had never explained the auras he saw to her, because that would mean explaining his dad's, and Izuku did not have the mental capacity to deal with that. The man groaned out something like, "I'm never having kids," before pulling out his wallet. Was he trying to bribe Izuku? Izuku only took bribes in the form of cheese and whale-themed blankets. Instead of pulling out some cash, the man pulled out a card and tossed it to Izuku, who somehow caught it with his free hand. The man raised an impressed eyebrow. "I'm a pro hero." Izuku gaped at that and quickly looked down at the card. Sure enough, he held in his hands an authentic HPSC-assigned pro hero license. "Eraserhead?" Izuku read out. "That's a silly hero name." The man scoffed and held out his hand for Izuku to throw the card back. He caught it between two fingers. "Yeah, well, I'm an underground hero. I don't need a fancy name." An underground hero? So there was more than one type of hero. Underground implied out of the spotlight. Maybe there were some good heroes. Izuku just hadn't heard of them because they were busy actually saving lives instead of chasing the media like the others. "I'm Midoriya Izuku," he introduced himself, standing up and dusting off his yukata. "Nice to meet you, kid. Now, are you ready to find your parents?" Aizawa asked, following Izuku's lead and standing up. Izuku nodded. Aizawa held out his hand. "Can I pick you up?" Izuku appreciated that he asked. Most adults would see a small child and assume what they wanted. Aizawa gave him a choice. Izuku looked down at his fish. He didn't want to drop her, so it might be safer if Aizawa picked him up. He nodded his approval. Instead of holding him on his hip like most adults would, the pro hero lifted Izuku up to his shoulders. Whoa, Izuku had never been this tall before. He had only reached 145 centimeters as Marinette. It was possible he might have gotten taller with time, but he hadn't even reached his growth spurt before. Izuku shook off the thought. From this altitude, Izuku could see over the tops of most of the surrounding stalls. Aizawa led them into the crowd and called to Izuku, "Look around for your parents." Izuku searched through the sea of hair until he spotted a frantic green accompanied by a fretting white. "Mom! Dad!" he shouted. Both heads whipped towards his voice, and they rushed over. His dad pulled his arm back like he was about to punch the man holding Izuku, and Aizawa tensed under him, hand coming up to catch the fist if needed. But Izuku's dad wasn't who he should be worried about. Out of the corner of his eye, Izuku saw his mom begin to pull something sparking from her bag, and nope, they were not doing this in front of Izuku's new favorite hero. "Stop!" His parents froze. "This is Aizawa. He helps me find you," Izuku said, exasperated. He wanted to pull a hand down his face, but one of them was occupied with his fish and the other keeping himself steady on Aizawa's shoulders. He's a pro hero. His parents didn't untense. Izuku groaned. "You're embarrassing me," he whined. That got a reaction out of them. His dad relaxed his posture and his mom put the taser back in her bag. "Oh, Izuku, honey, we're sorry," his mom apologized. Then she turned her attention to Aizawa. "Thank you so much for finding our baby," she bowed. Aizawa followed their lead and relaxed. "It was no trouble," he responded, lifting Izuku off his shoulders to the ground, where he was immediately picked up by his dad. "Are you all right, Izuku? Are you hurt?" his dad fretted. There was smoke leaking out of his mouth, which caused Izuku to cough. "I'm fine, now put me down," he demanded, kicking him as best he could from his convoluted position against his father's chest. When Izuku was finally released from his prison, he turned and bowed to Aizawa. "Thank you for the help, Aizawa-san." Aizawa looked uncomfortable with the whole social interaction. "It's no problem, kid." Just then, the group turned towards a shout from the crowd. "Hey, Shota! Look what we found! Cat-shaped snacks. They were selling these to raise money for—" "Shota! Who's the little listener?" came the voice of none other than the voice hero himself. He had his hair down and wore a gentle purple yukata with a sun pattern. He looked nothing like he did in costume, but Izuku would recognize that voice anywhere. "Present Mike?" Izuku shouted in surprise. "Oh my Kwame, I listen to your radio show every night. You're my second favorite hero. Third now. Eraserhead's my favorite," he rambled. "Wow, I'm surprised you recognized me. Good job, little listener." He ruffled Izuku's hair. "I'll settle for third place. Let me tell you a secret." He leaned towards Izuku conspiratorially. "Eraser's my favorite hero, too." Izuku giggled, and Aizawa huffed and rolled his eyes. Izuku's parents were introducing themselves to the pair and explaining how Aizawa had found Izuku when he got lost, when Izuku noticed another figure behind present Mike. They were wearing a light blue yukata with embroidered clouds, their right sleeve pinned up over their stump. Izuku's jaw dropped as he gaped at his therapist, who was busy stuffing his face with takoyaki. "Oboro? What are you doing here?" he shouted, unintentionally cutting off the adult's conversation. Oboro jumped, nearly dropping his snack, before smiling and shouting back, "Oh, hi, Izuku!" Present Mike looked between the approaching man and Izuku, then back again. "Oboro? Where do you know the kid from?" Oboro stopped and looked towards Izuku, giving him the chance to describe their relationship. Izuku appreciated the gesture. "Oboro's my therapist." The adults around him all got looks of understanding. "And you didn't answer my question. What are you doing here?" Izuku asked, tilting his head. Oboro looked amused. "I'm enjoying the festival with my partners," he said, slinging his arm around Aizawa, who made a disgusted face. "Ew, you're covered in takoyaki sauce," he complained. Oboro continued. "What, you didn't think I lived in my office, did you?" Izuku blushed. It wasn't that he didn't know logically that his therapist had life outside of work. It was just that he'd never thought about it. Oboro must have taken his blush as a yes because he laughed. The surprise at seeing both Oboro and present Mike quickly wore off as the adults talked about boring adult things. He was ready to go home. When Izuku glanced at Aizawa, he could tell he was thinking the same thing. Izuku pulled at his mom's kimono. When she bent down, he whispered, "I'm tired," so she'd know it was time to politely end this conversation. Kwame, adults could talk for ages. On the way to the car, Izuku's mind finally caught up with him. Did Oboro say Eraserhead and present Mike were his partners? Was Izuku's therapist married to two pro heroes? This concludes Chapter 14 of The Second Life of the Guardian. I hope you enjoyed this one. It made me laugh writing it, especially the end. The next chapter should be up soon. Thank you so much for listening.